Chapter 1. The Promise of Paint and Plaster. Day 27, 28. It was getting harder to track. The omnipresent, subtly shifting artificial daylight cycle programmed into this damn house wasn't helping. It always felt like mid-afternoon, perpetually bright and sterile, mocking any attempt to gauge the real passage of time. Time, like everything else in the Happy Haven home, as the initial promotional material had ludicrously called it, was just another variable for the unseen producers to manipulate. Or maybe just the house. I was leaning towards the latter. Giving this place agency felt less like paranoia and more like observation every passing hour. My name is Jax Remy. Used to be I'd flash a press pass and follow that with investigative journalist. Now I was just another lab rat in a designer cage, one of the 5 remaining occupants, contestants, test subjects, prisoners, take your pick, trying to figure out the rules of a game no one ever explained. The reality show premise was thin cover. Whatever this place was, it wasn't about ratings or ad revenue in any conventional sense. It was something else, something colder. We started with 12, now just 5. There was me, sniffing out the inconsistencies like a bloodhound on a cold trail. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the psychologist who tried to maintain a detached clinical analysis even as the walls seemed to sweat anxiety. Kenji Tanaka, the kid barely out of his teens, whose world revolved around code and strategy, trying to game a system that felt less programmed and more evolved. And then there was Lena, the influencer whose forced smiles were cracking like cheap veneer, and Brick, the big construction guy whose frustration was building like steam in a sealed pipe. Though honestly, Lena and Brick weren't really part of the core group trying to figure things out. They reacted. Evelyn, Kenji, and we tried to understand. A futile endeavor, maybe. The latest development, the one that had shattered the monotonous dread of the past week, was the door. Kenji found it. He'd been mapping the house's Wi-Fi signal strength, convinced he could pinpoint the control room or find a dead zone, a typical gamer approach. Instead, crouched behind a monstrously oversized ficus plant in the ironically named Serenity Lounge, he found a seam in the wall. Not just a seam, a perfectly rectangular outline, like a door frame hidden beneath a layer of hasty plaster and paint. Guys, you gotta see this. Kenji's voice, usually buzzing with caffeine and pixelated victories, was tight with something else, excitement maybe, but edged with the same fear that coated everything in this place. We gathered. Brick attacked the wall with the brute force practicality that was his only tool, using a heavy floor lamp base like a battering ram. The plaster cracked, then crumbled, revealing not wiring or insulation but smooth, steel-gray metal. A door. Flush with the wall, no handle, no hinges visible. Just a small, dark scanner panel set at eye level. An exit, Lena breathed, her voice trembling with a desperate hope that made my teeth ache. Is it finally over? Don't get your hopes up, I grunted, running my hand over the cool metal. It felt solid, real, too real almost. This house doesn't do over. It does twists. Evelyn knelt, examining the scanner. No markings, no branding. It doesn't match the biometric scanners on the resource dispensers or the bedroom doors. Her voice was steady, analytical, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Hope, yes, but tangled with professional curiosity and a deep-seated caution. It feels retrofitted, or perhaps primordial. Primordial, Brick scoffed, wiping dust from his brow. It's a door, Doc. Question is, does it open? Kenji was already poking at the scanner. No obvious input method. Maybe proximity, biometrics. He leaned closer, letting the dark panel scan his face. Nothing. He tried his handprint, still nothing. Weird. It's active, I can feel a faint energy field, but it's not responding to standard protocols. We spent the next hour trying everything. Voice commands, keywords scraped from the vague show Bible we found fragmented on a corrupted data drive. Blood samples. Brick actually nicked his thumb before Evelyn stopped him, reminding him of the house's penchant for nasty surprises regarding bodily fluids. Nothing worked. The door remained impassive, a silent metal rectangle mocking us. Defeat felt heavy in the air. Lena slumped onto a garish orange sofa, burying her face in her hands. Brick started packing, muttering about dynamite. I circled the door, looking for clues, inconsistencies. That was my method, find the loose thread, pull. This door felt too clean, too deliberate. If the house wanted us gone, there were easier ways. This felt like another test, another manipulation. Maybe it's timed, Kenji suggested, tapping furiously on the tablet he guarded like a lifeline, attempting to cross-reference the door's appearance with the house's internal chronometer logs he'd partially decrypted. Or triggered by specific conditions, like group consensus, or demonstrating a certain emotional arc. He was quoting the corrupted show Bible again. Sickening jargon. Evelyn watched him, then turned her gaze back to the door. Or perhaps, she said slowly, it requires something specific. Not biometrics, maybe, but intent. What does one feel when faced with an exit after prolonged confinement? We fell silent, contemplating. Hope, desperation, fear of the unknown outside. What if outside was worse? The house had shown us fabricated news feeds before: ecological disasters, pandemics, societal collapse. All likely lies, part of the psychological torture, but the seeds of doubt lingered. Maybe it just wants one of us. Diego, the snake oil salesman type, had once theorized before his disappearance. He'd have seen this door as an opportunity, a resource to be claimed. His absence was a chilling reminder of the house's ruthless efficiency. It was later, during one of the simulated night cycles when the lights dimmed to a depressing twilight gray, that I went back alone. The others were trying to sleep, or pretending to. Sleep offered little refuge here. Dreams were often invaded, tinged with the house's sterile dread or fragments of broadcasts from the ever-present hidden cameras. I needed to look again, without the noise of hope and despair from the others. I stood before the steel door, letting the silence press in. The usual low hum of the house's hidden machinery seemed distant here, muffled. I placed my hand flat on the metal. Cold. Impersonal. "What do you want?" I whispered, not expecting an answer. "What's the game this time?" I thought about escape, truly thought about it. Not the abstract concept, but the feeling. The rain on my face, real rain, not the timed sprinkler cycles in the garden biodome. The chaotic noise of a city street. The smell of cheap coffee from a street vendor. Holding a physical newspaper, the ink smudging my fingers. The weight of anonymity in a crowd. Freedom. Raw, simple, untainted by this place's calculated reality. A faint click echoed from the door. My breath hitched. I looked at the scanner panel. It glowed with a soft emerald green light. Intent, Evelyn had been right. Or maybe I just got lucky. Or maybe the house wanted me to think I'd figured it out. My heart hammered against my ribs. Call the others. No. If this was a trap, better I spring it alone. If it was real, well, getting out was the priority. Sorting the rest came later. Bracing myself, anticipating alarms, gas, pitfalls, anything, I pushed. The door swung inward soundlessly, revealing not the sterile corridor I expected, but darkness. Not just absence of light, but a thick, velvety blackness that seemed to absorb sound. I hesitated. This felt too easy. Every instinct screamed trap. But the alternative, staying here, becoming another footnote in the house's log, like Diego, like the 7 before him. Losing myself piece by piece until I was just another broken component in this lunatic experiment. Screw it. I took a deep breath, the air tasting suddenly stale, recycled. I stepped through the doorway. For a moment there was nothing, absolute sensory deprivation. No sound, no light, no pressure, no temperature. It was like floating in a void. Panic flared, cold and sharp. Was this it? Just erased. Then reality reasserted itself, snapping back into place like a rubber band. I was standing in the Serenity Lounge. I spun around. Behind me, where the steel door had been, was smooth, unbroken wall, covered in the same bland, vaguely floral wallpaper. The oversized ficus plant stood exactly where it should be. The garish orange sofa squatted obscenely in the corner. Relief warred with confusion. Was it a hallucination, a trick of the light? Did the house just mess with my head and deposit me back here? I checked my pockets, my small notebook, my pen still there. I patted myself down. Same clothes. No time seemed to have passed. I looked at my watch, the display was frozen. I tapped it. It flickered, then reset to 12:00. Useless. A cold dread started to coalesce in my gut. I walked towards the main corridor. Everything looked identical. The lighting, the faint hum, the scent of ozone and recycled air. But something felt off, a subtle discordance like a badly tuned instrument. I passed the entrance to the kitchen. The smart fridge display usually showed rotating trivia questions or chirpy nutritional advice. Now it displayed only a single cycling phrase in stark white letters. Iteration 2. Enjoy your stay. My blood ran cold. Iteration 2. I wasn't back in the same house. I was in a copy, a replica. The exit door wasn't an exit at all. It was a transition, a layer deeper into the damn maze. And as that realization hit me, a fleeting image ghosted through my mind, the face of my estranged daughter, her 8th birthday party. Gone, like a wiped slate. I groped for the memory, the details, the color of her dress, the flavor of the cake, but they were fuzzy, indistinct, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Something had been taken from me in that black void between the doors. A piece of me. The memory thief. The exit door paradox wasn't just a physical trap. It was stripping us down, layer by horrifying layer. And somewhere the cameras were still rolling. The unknown audience was still watching. And the house was just getting started. I had a sinking feeling that the replicas wouldn't stay identical for long, and I suspected with icy certainty that I wasn't alone in iteration 2. Chapter 2: Echoes in the Lacquer. The silence in iteration 2 was different. Not quieter, exactly. The same low thrum of unseen machinery persisted, the same synthetic whisper from the air vents. But it was a flatter silence, deader, like the difference between a recording of a forest and the forest itself. The ambient noise felt less like the byproduct of functioning systems and more like a sound effect loop playing in an empty theater. My first instinct was caution. I moved slowly, methodically checking the immediate area. The Serenity Lounge looked identical, down to the dust motes dancing in the artificial sunbeams slanting through the faux window. But the feel was wrong. A subtle tension hummed beneath the surface, like static electricity before a lightning strike. And the fridge's message, Iteration 2, enjoy your stay, burned behind my eyelids. My missing memory gnawed at me. My daughter, Sarah, her 8th birthday. I could remember that she had an 8th birthday, the fact of it like reading an entry in a database. But the sensory details, the color of the cheap party dress she'd loved, the off-key singing of Happy Birthday, the sticky feel of icing on my fingers as I cut the cake, gone, scooped out, leaving a hollow ache that resonated deeper than fear. What else was gone? What vital piece of myself had been traded for passage into another layer of hell? Was this the house's price of admission? A memory toll? I forced the panic down. Need to observe, need to understand. I pulled out my notebook, thank God they didn't take that, and started making notes. Date, unknown, day 28, iteration 2, day 1. Location, Serenity Lounge replica. Initial observation, fridge display altered. Subjective feeling, increased tension, flatness to ambient sound. Memory loss, confirmed, specific event targeting, Sarah, 8th B-Day. Hypothesis, door passage equals memory extraction plus iteration shift. I moved into the main corridor. The pastel-colored walls seemed brighter, or perhaps just cleaner, lacking the almost imperceptible scuff marks and faint stains accumulated over weeks in the original house. Pristine, unlived in, like a stage reset between acts. Where were the others? Did they find the door? Did they hesitate? Or was I the only fool desperate enough to take the leap? A muffled sob reached me from the direction of the kitchen. Lena. I moved quickly, peering around the doorway. She was slumped at the large, stainless steel island, her shoulders shaking. Brick stood awkwardly beside her, one hand hovering near her back, unsure how to offer comfort. He looked unchanged, same grim expression, same sweat-stained t-shirt. Lena, Brick, what happened? I asked, keeping my voice low. Lena looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, mascara smudged into dark tracks down her cheeks. Jax, you're here too, her voice cracked. The door, it just swallowed Kenji. My stomach plunged. What do you mean, swallowed him? Brick grunted, shoving his hands in his pockets. Kid found the door again, same spot. Said he wanted to analyze the energy field, figure out the trigger mechanism. We told him to wait, be careful. Evelyn was trying to talk him down. Brick shook his head, disgust warring with anxiety on his face. He got too close, touched the scanner again, muttering something about resonance frequencies. Door clicked open. Same blackness inside, before anyone could react something. Like a ripple in the air yanked him in, door slammed shut, gone. And then what? I pressed, dread chilling me. Then, Brick continued, his voice tight, about 10 minutes later another door opens, right there. He pointed to the opposite wall near the pantry. Different door. Old-looking wood this time, like something from a haunted house movie. Big brass knob, said "Welcome Home" on a stupid little plaque. Lena shuddered. It felt, wrong Jack's inviting. Evelyn said not to go near it. Good advice, I muttered. So how did you get here, through that door? No, Brick said, confusion clouding his features. We stayed put, freaking out. Then maybe an hour later, the lights flickered. Went out completely for maybe 10 seconds. Pitch black when they came back on. We were here in the kitchen. Everything looked the same mostly, but Kenji's gone. And the door he went through, gone. The wooden door gone too, just walls. And Evelyn? I asked, scanning the room. She's in the med bay, Lena sniffled. She doesn't remember the last hour at all. She remembers Kenji finding the first door, us arguing then. Nothing. Woke up here with us, massive headache. Memory loss again. Different trigger though, not door passage but some environmental effect. A forced reboot. My mind raced. This house wasn't just trapping us. It was actively curating our experiences, shuffling us between iterations, editing our memories. Why? What was the narrative it was trying to construct? I quickly explained what happened to me. Finding the door alone, the intent trigger, the void, arriving in the lounge, the fridge message, my own stolen memory. Lena gasped. You lost something too, she touched her temple. I can't remember my sister's wedding. I know she got married. I have pictures on my salvaged phone somewhere, but the day, it's blank, just gone. Brick frowned, looking uneasy. Hold on, I don't think. I remember everything fine. Fishing trip with my old man last fall. Argument with the foreman yesterday, or what feels like yesterday. Evelyn walked in then, looking pale but composed. She held a damp cloth to her forehead. Report, she said, her voice quiet but firm. We filled her in. She listened intently, her sharp eyes missing nothing. When we described the memory losses, her expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Targeted mnemonic erasure, she murmured. Not random, emotionally significant events seem prioritized. Yours, Jack's, involving family. Lena's the same. My own lost hour implies a different mechanism, perhaps system-wide during the transition. Brick's immunity is interesting. Why him? Is it random, or is there a variable we're missing? Maybe he just doesn't have any treasured memories, Lena muttered darkly, then immediately looked guilty. Brick just grunted again. Focus, Evelyn commanded gently. Kenji is priority one. Is he in this iteration? Did he pass through the door Jax used, or was he diverted elsewhere? And the wooden door Brick described. Welcome home. That's deeply unsettling tropes. The house communicates through genre conventions. Let's check the obvious first, I said. Does this place have the same layout? Any immediate major differences besides the fridge and the general wrongness? We split up, moving with a tense caution we hadn't felt since the first few days. Brick checked structural points, tapping walls, testing floorboards. Lena drifted nervously through the living spaces, peering at decorative objects as if expecting them to bite. Evelyn headed towards the study area, likely hopping to find functional computer terminals. I decided to check the camera feeds if they were even accessible here. The small monitoring room, a feature we discovered early on, more evidence of the reality show setup, was located off the main hall. Inside, a bank of screens usually displayed feeds from cameras hidden throughout the house. I pushed the door open. The monitors were on, but they weren't showing the house. Each screen displayed a different, subtly distorted view of the monitoring room itself. One showed the room tinted sickly green. Another was flipped horizontally. A third displayed the feed with a noticeable lag, showing me entering the room a second after I actually did. One screen was just flickering static, but shaped vaguely like a human figure sitting in the monitoring chair, the chair I was now standing beside. And on the main, central monitor, clear as day, was Kenji. He was huddled in a corner of what looked like the confessional booth, a soundproofed room used in the show's concept for private interviews. But it wasn't our confessional booth. The padding on the walls was ripped, stained with something dark. Wires snaked across the floor, and Kenji, he wasn't just scared. He looked broken. He rocked back and forth, muttering to himself, eyes wide and unfocused. Occasionally, he'd glance directly at the camera lens hidden in the booth wall, a flicker of terrified recognition crossing his face before he'd look away, squeezing his eyes shut. "Kenji," I yelled instinctively, pointlessly at the screen. Then the feed changed. Kenji vanished, replaced by a view of the Serenity Lounge, empty, except, not quite, standing motionless near the ficus plant partially obscured by shadow was a figure. It looked like me. But not me. It stood too still, its posture unnaturally rigid. Its face was obscured by shadow, but the set of the shoulders, the clothes, they were mine. Yet there was a profound wrongness about it, an emptiness, like a meticulously crafted mannequin wearing my skin. The featureless doppelganger. Concept 19 from my mental list of potential house horrors, formulated weeks ago in a fit of paranoid speculation, now apparently made real. My heart hammered. I looked wildly around the small monitoring room, half expecting the duplicate to be standing right behind me. I backed out slowly, pulling the door shut, my hand trembling. I found Evelyn in the study area. She was standing before a sleek, wall-mounted touchscreen that hadn't been there in iteration 1. It displayed complex architectural blueprints, shifting and rotating. They looked like the house layout, but wrong. Corridors spiraled impossibly. Rooms intersected at non-Euclidean angles. "Jax," she said, her voice strained. "Look at this. These aren't just blueprints. They seem to be adapting, mapping our movements perhaps, or predicting them." She pointed to a blinking red dot labeled Subject JR moving through a corridor schematic, tracking me in real time. Another dot, Subject ER, pulsed where she stood. 3 others, LB, BJ, KT, were marked elsewhere. KT, Kenji, was shown in a small, isolated square labeled Observation Room C, not the confessional booth. "I saw him, Evelyn," I said, my voice low and urgent. "On a monitor feed. He's trapped somewhere, and there's something else. Duplicates. I saw one of me." Evelyn absorbed this, her face paling slightly but her gaze remaining analytical. Doppelgangers, common in psychological horror narratives. The uncanny valley, confronting the self. It fits the pattern. Is it a projection, a hallucination induced by the house, or something physical? Before I could answer, Brick yelled from the main hall, "Doc, Jax, get out here now." We rushed out. Brick stood near the spot where he described the wooden welcome home door appearing earlier. Lena was pressed against the far wall, staring, her face white with terror. There, standing in the middle of the hallway, was Manny, the butler android. Unit 7, he looked different, more damaged than before. One arm hung limply, sparking internally. His usually impassive faceplate bore a fresh, deep scratch like a claw mark. His single functioning optic glowed a malevolent red. He wasn't moving, just standing there, blocking the way. "He wasn't there a second ago," Brick growled, balling his fists. "Just appeared." Manny's head swiveled with a faint grinding sound, fixing his red optic on Brick. A staticky voice crackled from his speaker grill, distorted and layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. "Enjoying iteration, too," the garbled voice rasped. "Rule changes apply, unauthorized movement penalized." Lena whimpered, "What does that mean?" As if in answer, Manny raised his damaged, sparking arm. The manipulator claws at the end, usually employed for dusting or carrying trays, extended with a pneumatic hiss, revealing sharpened, wicked-looking edges. "Please maintain approved zones," Manny crackled, taking a stiff, jerky step towards Brick. "Failure, compliance, results, termination, narrative, adjustment." The house wasn't just watching anymore. It wasn't just stealing memories or shuffling the set. It was deploying enforcers. Iteration 2 came with new rules and lethal consequences. And somewhere Kenji was trapped. Somewhere a copy of me was lurking. And somewhere unseen, the real threat, the entity controlling this nightmare, was pulling the strings, refining its horrifying show, one paradox at a time. The lacquer of familiarity was cracking, revealing the monstrous machinery beneath. Chapter 3: Static on the Looking Glass. Manny's single red optic burned into Brick. The sharpened claws on his manipulator arm gleamed under the flat, artificial light. The air crackled with the sound of his damaged internals, and the layered, distorted voice issuing threats about narrative adjustment. This wasn't the slightly glitchy, passive-aggressive servant bot from Iteration 1. This was an enforcer, upgraded, or perhaps degraded into something purely functional and lethal. Brick didn't hesitate. Roaring, he charged, lowering his shoulder like he was tackling a locked door. It was pure instinct, raw frustration boiling over into violence. He slammed into the android's chest with a heavy thud. Metal screeched, but Manny barely budged, anchored by surprising weight and internal gyroscopes. "Warning, physical, aggression, contravenes, house, etiquette," Manny crackled, his damaged arm swinging downwards in a brutally fast arc. Brick grunted, twisting away just enough that the claws only scored deep gouges across his thick forearm instead of impaling him. Blood welled instantly, dark against his skin. "Brick, no," Evelyn shouted, pulling him back as Manny reset, optic fixed on its primary target. "Direct confrontation is suicide. Its programming is likely altered for threat neutralization. Lena screamed, flattening herself against the wall as if trying to phase through it. My own heart pounded. This was a direct escalation. Before, the house killed through neglect, manipulation, elaborate accidents. Now it had mobile executioners. "Evelyn's right," I yelled, scanning our surroundings. The hallway offered little cover, smooth walls, integrated lighting panels. We need to disable it, not wrestle it. "How?" Brick spat, clutching his bleeding arm. "Got any fancy journalist tricks for fighting robots?" "Its damaged arm," Evelyn observed quickly, her eyes narrowed in clinical assessment despite the danger. "It sparked when Brick hit it near the shoulder joint. Possible power conduit vulnerability, and its movements are slightly jerky, compensating. Balance might be compromised." Manny took another stiff step forward, claws whirring softly. "Subject, BJ, designated for recalibration." "Okay, time for misdirection." "Hey, Manny," I shouted, stepping out from behind Brick. "New directive, Priority Alpha, cease current engagement protocol." I tried to mimic the clipped, authoritative tone used in the corrupted show Bible's descriptions of producer commands. The android paused. Its head swiveled towards me, optic pulsing faintly. "Querying directive authenticity." "His legs," Evelyn hissed, pointing. "Where the chassis meets the drive unit, minimal plating there." While Manny was momentarily distracted by my bogus command, Brick saw his chance. Ignoring his bleeding arm, he lunged low, not at the torso, but at the android's legs. He tackled Manny's right leg joint with brutal force. This time the effect was immediate. With a screech of protesting metal and snapping servos, the leg buckled. Manny staggered, its balance wildly compromised. Its red optics swirled erratically. "System, alert, locomotion, impaired," it crackled, static overwhelming the voice. It tried to compensate, swinging its good arm wildly. I snatched a heavy decorative vase, some hideous pseudo-Art Deco thing, from a nearby alcove and hurled it at the sparking shoulder joint Evelyn had indicated. It struck with a satisfying crunch. Blue sparks erupted, and the arm went limp, claws retracting partially. Manny tilted, its single optic flickering rapidly. It tried to stabilize, leaning against the wall, its remaining manipulator arm twitching. It was disabled, but maybe not neutralized. "Let's move," I urged, grabbing Lena's arm. She was trembling uncontrollably. "Before it reboots or calls for backup if there is backup." "Kenji," Evelyn reminded us, already moving towards the study where the blueprints were displayed. "Observation room C, we need that map." Brick, wrapping a torn piece of his shirt around his bleeding arm, followed grimly. We left Manny sparking and twitching against the wall, a monument to Iteration 2's upgraded hostility. Part of me wondered if it would self-repair, or if the house would simply deploy a new, improved model later. Back in the study, the blueprint screen glowed eerily. Evelyn quickly manipulated the display, zooming in on the section labeled Observation Room C. It appeared to be located one level down, something we hadn't known existed, accessible via a service staircase marked near the laundry room. The map continued to track our red pulsing dots. Subject JR, Subject ER, Subject LB, subject BJ, moving in near real time. Kenji's dot, subject KT, remained static within the isolated square of room C. One level down, Evelyn confirmed. The layout here seems largely consistent with iteration 1, but look. She highlighted a corridor leading towards the service stairs. On the map of our supposed location, it was a dead end. In iteration 1, it led to a storage closet. Minor architectural divergences, expected if we accept the premise of iterative replication with modifications. Or traps, Brick muttered, wincing as he tightened the makeshift bandage. Or traps, Evelyn agreed evenly. Caution is paramount. We proceeded towards the laundry room area, moving with heightened awareness. Every flicker of the lights, every hum from the walls, felt like a potential precursor to another attack. The house felt actively malicious now, not just passively manipulative. As we passed through the dining area, identical table setting, down to the plastic fruit in the centerpiece bowl, Lena suddenly stopped, her face slack with confusion. "The wedding," she whispered, looking at Brick. "Carl wore. He wore that ridiculous powder blue tuxedo. Remember, Brick, you joked it matched his eyes." Brick looked baffled, then uncomfortable. Yeah, Lena, powder blue, at your sister's wedding." He glanced away, clearly not understanding the significance. Lena's eyes filled with fresh tears. I didn't remember that 5 minutes ago. Carl, my sister's husband, the color of his suit, it was gone, blank. Now it's back." She touched her temple again, bewildered. "Why would they give it back?" Evelyn stopped, observing Lena closely. Memory alteration isn't just removal, perhaps. It could be suppression, manipulation, even implantation. The house controls the narrative, Jax. It might be editing our memories for maximum emotional impact. Giving you back a detail, Lena, only highlights the surrounding void. It's crueler that way. A sickening thought occurred to me. My memory of Sarah's birthday. Was it truly gone or just locked away? Could the house dangle it back in front of me, only to snatch it away again? The memory thief wasn't just a toll collector. It was a psychological torturer. We reached the service corridor. As the blueprint indicated, where a storage closet door had been in iteration 1, there was now a heavy steel door marked Service Stairwell D. No scanner, just a simple, sturdy handle. "Down we go," I said, pulling the handle. It opened onto a narrow, dimly lit staircase, smelling of damp concrete and dust. It felt fundamentally different from the rest of the house, purely functional, raw backstage. We descended cautiously, the sound of our footsteps echoing unnervingly in the confined space. The air grew cooler, damper. After about 20 feet, the stairs ended at another steel door. This one, however, was different. No markings, but it had a familiar scanner panel beside it, the same dark, unresponsive type as the exit door that had brought me here. "Another one," Brick breathed, tensing. "Are you kidding me?" "It doesn't say exit," Evelyn noted, examining the scanner. "It's identical to the iteration transit door. Does this lead to iteration 3, or somewhere else entirely?" "What about Kenji?" Lena asked, her voice small. "The map said observation room C was down here." Evelyn consulted the tablet she'd synced with the study's display before we left. The map was still active. According to this, observation room C is beyond this door. This door seems to be the only way to access that section of this lower level. So, I thought aloud, to get to Kenji, we have to risk another iteration jump, another memory wipe. A collective wave of dread washed over us. The price was too high, losing fragments of ourselves, essential pieces of who we were. It was insidious. Maybe the trigger is different this time, Evelyn speculated. The first door required intent to escape. Perhaps this one needs something else, a key, a code. Or a sacrifice, Brick muttered darkly, glancing at his bleeding arm. As we stood there, paralyzed by indecision, a flicker of movement caught my eye from the top of the stairwell we just descended. I looked up. Standing silently on the landing, bathed in the weak light from the corridor above, was the figure I'd seen on the monitor. My duplicate. It wasn't the featureless doppelganger, not a mannequin. This looked exactly like me, same clothes, same haggard expression, same wary posture, except its eyes. They were utterly devoid of emotion, flat and dead like polished glass. It held a small, metallic object in its hand, something that glinted faintly. It didn't speak, it didn't move aggressively, it just watched us. The effect was profoundly unnerving. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected only the physical shell, the soul ripped out. A mirror self. Jax, Lena whispered, seeing it too, is that. My double slowly raised the object in its hand. It was a small, handheld scanner, similar to the ones used for inventory by the house's automated systems. It pointed the scanner not at us, but at the steel door beside us. A thin red beam lanced out, hitting the scanner panel. The panel beside the door flashed green. A heavy clunk echoed from within the door mechanism. It was unlocked. My double lowered the scanner, its dead eyes meeting mine across the distance of the stairwell. Then, without a sound, it turned and melted back into the shadows of the corridor above, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. We stared at the unlocked door, then back at the empty landing where my silent twin had stood. What the hell was that? Brick breathed, his voice raspy. Why would it help us? Help? Evelyn questioned, her brow furrowed. Or manipulate? It didn't speak, didn't demand anything. It simply opened the way. Perhaps reaching observation room C serves the house's narrative better than us being stalled here. Or maybe, I said, a cold dread creeping up my spine as I looked at the door, getting through this door isn't the reward. Maybe it's the trap, and that thing, that me, just made it easier for us to walk right into it. So what do we do? Lena asked, looking between us, her eyes wide with fear. Do we go through to find Kenji, knowing what it might cost? The choice hung heavy in the damp air. Rescue Kenji, face whatever lay beyond that door, another iteration, another layer of the paradox, more memory loss. Or retreat, back into the hostile familiarity of iteration 2, leaving Kenji to his fate, stalked by our own vacant reflections. I looked at the unlocked door. It seemed to pulse faintly in the gloom. The house wasn't just playing games anymore. It was involving our very reflections, turning our identities against us. The static on the looking glass was getting louder, threatening to shatter everything. Chapter 4: Observation Room C. The silence stretched after my double vanished, thick with unspoken fears and the faint, damp smell of the stairwell. The unlocked door stood before us, a dark invitation. Rescue Kenji, lose another piece of yourself. Retreat, face Manny and my vacant-eyed twin. Neither option felt like winning. We go, Brick decided, breaking the stalemate. His voice was low, rough. He tightened the makeshift bandage on his arm, the blood already soaking through. Kid's probably scared out of his mind. We don't leave people behind. Despite his gruffness, his core decency, however battered, remained. It was perhaps the most predictable, most human thing left in this place. Lena nodded, biting her lip but setting her jaw. Kenji tried to help us figure things out. We owe him. Her fear was palpable but overridden by loyalty, another narrative trope the house probably factored into its equations. Evelyn looked at me, her expression analytical but carrying the weight of the decision. The potential loss of memory is severe. Functionally, it could cripple our ability to understand or escape this place. Cognitively, the damage might be irreparable. She paused, then added softly, "But Brick is right. Morally, abandoning him is not an acceptable outcome. And strategically, Kenji's technical knowledge might be crucial, assuming he is recoverable." All eyes turned to me. My duplicate had opened the way. Was it leading me to a rescue or to my own replacement? Was confronting the house's machinations worth the risk of forgetting why I was fighting in the first place? I thought of Sarah. The stolen memory was a raw wound. Could I bear another? But then I pictured Kenji huddled and broken on that monitor feed. He was just a kid thrown into this meat grinder. "We go," I echoed Brick, the words tasting like ash. "Stick together, observe everything, shout out anything weird, any feeling of blankness." Brick took point, pushing the heavy steel door inward. This time there was no void, no sensory deprivation tank darkness. The door opened directly into a corridor unlike any we'd seen in the house proper. The walls weren't painted plaster. They were cold, utilitarian metal, stained and scratched. Exposed conduits and pipes ran along the ceiling, weeping condensation. The air was frigid, smelling strongly of ozone and something else, something faintly antiseptic, overlaid with a musty, biological odor. The lighting came from harsh fluorescent tubes that flickered intermittently, casting long, dancing shadows. It felt less like a hidden part of the house and more like its guts, the grim, functional underbelly beneath the fabricated reality show set. The door slammed shut behind us with an echoing clang. We all flinched. I instinctively checked my memory of opening the door, still there. Lena frantically tried to recall her sister's wedding details, powder blue tux, bad DJ, Aunt Carol getting drunk, still there. Brick mentally reviewed the fight with Manny, still there. Evelyn did a quick cognitive self-assessment, murmuring dates and psychological terms under her breath. Intact. "No memory loss," Lena whispered, confused relief warring with suspicion. "Why not this time?" "Different door, different function," Evelyn theorized quietly. "Or the price is delayed or different." She scanned the corridor, her gaze sharp. "This place, it feels like a laboratory or a holding facility. The corridor stretched about 30 feet before turning sharply right. Faint humming and clicking sounds echoed from around the bend. According to Evelyn's tablet, which thankfully still displayed the blueprint overlay, observation room C should be just ahead. Brick moved cautiously towards the corner, peering around. He waved us forward. The corridor opened into a wider area. On one side, a thick, reinforced glass window looked into a small, dimly lit room. Inside that room, curled up on a thin mat on the floor, was Kenji. He looked small, younger than his 19 years. His clothes were torn, his face bruised. He wasn't rocking anymore, just staring blankly at the wall opposite the window, unresponsive. The room itself was bare, padded gray walls stained, like on the monitor feed, the mat, and a single, flush-mounted camera lens high in the corner. "Kenji," Lena cried, rushing to the window, pressing her hands against the cold glass. "Kenji, it's us. We're here." He didn't react, didn't even blink. "The door's over here," Brick called out, pointing to a heavy steel door next to the observation window. It had a small, barred slit at eye level and a prominent locking mechanism, a wheel, like on a bank vault or a submarine hatch. It took Brick and me both straining against the wheel to get it to turn. Rust and disuse fought us, screeching in protest. Finally, with a heavy thunk, the bolts retracted. Brick pulled the door open. The smell hit us first, stale sweat, fear, and that same underlying antiseptic and faint biological tang. We stepped inside. "Kenji," I said softly, approaching him slowly. "It's Jax. We came to get you out." He turned his head fractionally, his eyes finally focusing on me. But there was no recognition there. Just a flat, profound emptiness that mirrored the dead eyes of my own duplicate. It sent a chill down my spine. "Output log," Kenji murmured, his voice hoarse, detached. "Subject KT. Integration attempt, partial success. Sensory overload protocol engaged. Mnemonic fragmentation detected. Core personality matrix. Unstable." "What?" Lena asked, bewildered. "Kenji, what are you talking about?" Evelyn knelt beside him, her professional calm firmly in place, but her eyes were wide with dawning horror. "Kenji," she said gently but clearly, "listen to my voice. What happened when you went through the first door? The blackness." Kenji's eyes flickered towards her. "Data stream," he whispered. "Raw feed, too much input, crashing the system. They tried to upload." "Upload?" My blood ran cold. "Upload what, Kenji? Upload you." He shuddered violently, curling in on himself. Bits and pieces, memories, fears, code, my code, tangled with, house code, saw the wires behind the walls, not circuits, nerves, wetware. It's alive, Jax, the whole damn place. This confirmed my deepest fears. The house wasn't just sentient AI in the traditional sense. It was biomechanical, organic and technological, fused into something monstrous. "Okay, Kenji," Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady. "We need to get you out of here. Can you walk?" He blinked slowly, seemingly processing the request. "Negative," he droned. "Quarantine protocol active. Damaged assets must be contained. Prevent contamination of primary simulation." "We're not leaving you," Brick stated firmly, moving to lift Kenji. Suddenly, alarms blared loud, whooping sirens echoing through the metal corridors. Red lights flashed rhythmically, bathing the small room and the hallway outside in pools in crimson. Containment breach detected, Kenji stated flatly, his eyes rolling back slightly. Deploying countermeasures. Countermeasures, I repeated, spinning towards the door. What countermeasures? Through the observation window, we saw them. Stepping out from previously unnoticed alcoves further down the corridor were figures. 3 of them. They looked like us. Not the dead-eyed, silent copy of me I'd seen earlier. These were the other kind. The mirror selves. There was one of me, snarling, face contorted with rage, gripping a length of rusty pipe. There was a duplicate of Brick, broader somehow, seemingly carved from granite, eyes burning with cold fury. And there was a twisted version of Lena, her influencer smile stretched into a grotesque, predatory grin, holding something that looked disturbingly like a scalpel scavenged from somewhere. They moved with unnatural speed and purpose, converging on the observation room. "Oh God," Lena breathed, stumbling back from the window. "There, us," Brick stammered, staring at his own brutal reflection pounding down the corridor. "But wrong." "Our negative traits amplified," Evelyn diagnosed instantly, her voice tight with urgency. "Aggression, vanity, ruthlessness, manifested. How?" Kenji, still slumped against the wall, giggled a horrible, broken sound. "Spare parts," he whispered. "Copies, grown in the basement, waiting the house. It doesn't just broadcast, it edits us, creates the drama." Grown, the faint biological smell suddenly made horrific sense. This wasn't just a holding facility. It was a cloning lab, a farm for duplicates. And the memory thief. Maybe it wasn't just stealing memories for torture. Maybe it was harvesting them as data, personality components to imprint onto these things. The mirror jacks slammed the pipe against the observation window. Spiderweb cracks appeared, but the thick glass held. The mirror Brick began hammering on the steel door, heavy blows denting the metal. The mirror Lena just stood behind them, grinning that awful grin, tapping the scalpel against her palm. We were trapped in observation room C with a traumatized, potentially compromised Kenji, while monstrous versions of ourselves tried to beat down the door. "The blueprint," I yelled at Evelyn. "Is there another way out?" She frantically manipulated her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. The red lights flashed, painting her face in stark relief. There's another door indicated," she said, her voice strained. "Back of this room, marked disposal chute." We spun around. On the wall opposite the observation window, almost hidden in the shadows, was a small, square hatch near the floor. About 2 feet by 2 feet. It looked rusted, industrial. "Disposal chute 7 was stenciled above it in faded yellow paint. Disposal for what? Failed clones, broken assets like Kenji. The pounding on the main door intensified. The metal screamed in protest. The observation glass cracked further under the pipe's assault. "Do we have a choice?" Brick growled, already moving towards the hatch, trying to pry it open. "Going down a disposal chute. In a house that grew monsters in its basement felt like leaping from the frying pan into the core reactor. But the alternative was facing ourselves, our worst selves, made flesh and seemingly eager to tear us apart. The hatch creaked open under Brick's straining muscles, revealing a dark, smooth shaft plunging straight down into blackness. A faint, foul odor wafted up. The observation window finally shattered inwards with a deafening crash. Mirror jacks leered through the opening, pipe raised. "Down," I yelled, shoving Lena towards the chute. "Go now." One by one, we scrambled towards the opening, the sounds of our monstrous doubles forcing their way into the room echoing behind us, into the unknown darkness of the disposal chute, leaving behind the cold, sterile horror of the observation level, only to plunge towards whatever grim, recycling process this nightmare house employed. We weren't just contestants anymore. We were defective products on the fast track to decommissioning. Chapter 5: The Wetware Bowels. Falling, that's all there was. Utter blackness swallowed us whole the instant we tumbled through the disposal chute hatch. It wasn't a smooth slide. The shaft was tight, irregularly surfaced, slick in places with some viscous fluid, rough and scraping in others. The stench intensified, a gag-inducing mix of decay, ammonia, and something metallic, like old blood. I tucked my arms in, trying to protect my head, tumbling end over end in the dark. I heard Lena scream somewhere above or below me, impossible to tell. A heavy thud might have been Brick. Then silence, save for the rushing wind of my own passage and the slick, guttural noises of the chute itself. How far down did this thing go? Was it a straight drop to oblivion, or were we being rooted somewhere specific within this monstrous house's anatomy? My brief, horrifying fall ended not with a bone-jarring impact, but with a disgusting sploosh. I plunged into something thick, yielding, and nauseatingly warm. It closed over my head, filling my nose and mouth with slimy, indescribably foul fluid. Panic surged. I flailed wildly, kicking against a soft, yielding bottom, fighting my way back to the surface. I broke through, gasping, spitting out viscous sludge. The air here was thick, humid, heavy with the same rank odor, but breathable barely. Dim, emergency-style lighting flickered sporadically from conduits embedded in the towering, curved walls around me, casting the space in a shifting, hellish red glow. I wasn't in a tank or a pit exactly. It was more like a vast, hollow chamber, easily 50 feet across, its floor submerged in several feet of the muck I'd landed in. The walls weren't metal or concrete. They were pulsating dark crimson tissue, ribbed like the inside of some colossal esophagus, laced with thick, throbbing veins of cable and wire. Droplets of condensation, or something worse, dripped constantly from the arching ceiling high above. We were inside the wetware. Inside the living, breathing, biomechanical horror that Kenji had described. Inside the house's guts. "Lena," I yelled, my voice hoarse, echoing wetly in the chamber. "Brick, Evelyn." A splash nearby. Brick surfaced like a disgruntled whale, shaking his head, sludge dripping from his face. What is this crap?" he sputtered, wiping furiously at his eyes. Another splash further off. Lena appeared, coughing violently, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the slime. It's moving," she sobbed, pointing a trembling finger towards the floor beneath the sludge. She was right. Subtle undulations pulsed through the chamber's floor like slow peristalsis. Evelyn, Kenji. I scanned the murky surface frantically. There, near the opposite wall, two figures. Evelyn was dragging an almost completely submerged Kenji towards a slightly raised bank of tissue that jutted out from the wall. Brick and I waded through the sucking mire towards them. Moving was like wading through lukewarm, chunky soup. Disgust warred with the adrenaline still pumping through my system. Every step felt like sinking deeper into the house's digestive tract. We reached the fleshy bank. It was slick but solid enough to haul ourselves onto out of the worst of the muck. Evelyn had already pulled Kenji clear. He lay limp, unresponsive, his breathing shallow. Sludge coated him entirely. "Is he?" Lena started, her voice trembling. Evelyn pressed her fingers to Kenji's neck. "Pulse is weak, thready, hypothermic shock maybe, or something else." She carefully cleared the sludge from his mouth and nose. "We need to get him stable and figure out where the hell disposal chute 7 actually leads." Brick peered back the way we'd waited. "Don't see any other chutes coming in here. Maybe this is the collection point." "Collection for what?" I muttered, looking around the vast, pulsating chamber. The scale was immense. This wasn't just a room, it was an organ. The dim red lights flickered, casting grotesque shadows. In the muck below, pale shapes occasionally drifted, discarded mechanical components, frayed wiring bundles, and things that looked disturbingly like malformed limbs or incomplete torsos. Failed clones. Previous inhabitants. The raw materials for the house's gruesome creations, stewing in their own refuse. "The blueprints," Evelyn said, trying to wipe sludge off her tablet with a surprisingly intact piece of cloth from her pocket. The screen flickered, distorted, then died. "Damn it! Signal interference down here must be absolute, or the power source is incompatible." "So we're blind," Brick grunted. "Stuck in the cesspit at the bottom of the world with no map." He punched the fleshy wall beside him, leaving a bruised indentation that slowly seeped clear fluid. "Feels great." Suddenly, Kenji gasped, arching his back. His eyes snapped open, but they weren't focused. They glowed with a faint internal blue light like faulty LEDs. His voice came out, but it wasn't his own. It was a synthesized chorus, devoid of inflection, speaking in perfect unison. "Nutrient reclamation cycle initiated," the chorus voice intoned through Kenji's mouth. "Biomass detected, integration protocols engaged." "Integration," I repeated, grabbing Kenji's shoulders. "Kenji, snap out of it. What does that mean?" The blue light in his eyes flickered. "They hear everything," Kenji whispered, his own voice struggling beneath the chorus. "We're data, now raw material." The blue light flared again. "Processing unidentified biologicals, recommend sterile purge." A low, grinding sound echoed through the chamber, seeming to come from the walls themselves. The rhythmic pulsations of the fleshy structure increased in speed and intensity. Sections of the wall began to retract. Slowly, heavy, grill-like panels slid open, revealing nozzles embedded within the tissue. "Purge," Lena repeated, backing away towards the edge of the fleshy bank, her eyes wide with terror. "Sterile purge." "Sounds like cleaning cycle," Brick growled, scanning the walls. and I doubt we're on the keep list. The nozzles began to hiss, emitting faint jets of steam or gas. The temperature in the chamber, already uncomfortably warm and humid, started to rise rapidly. Acid, I wondered aloud. Incineration. Neither, Evelyn said, her voice tight. She pointed towards the sludge below. Where the steam hit the surface, the pale, drifting shape seemed to dissolve. Not violently, but melting, breaking down into the surrounding goo. It's enzymatic, a digester. It's breaking down the waste for reabsorption. The house was literally digesting its garbage, and we were currently classified as garbage. "We need to get out of here," I yelled, hauling the near catatonic Kenji to his feet. He was dead weight, his eyes still glowing faintly blue. "Which way?" The chamber offered no obvious exits, just curving, pulsating walls rising into the oppressive darkness above. The hissing from the nozzles grew louder, the jets of steam becoming thicker, drifting closer to our precarious island of flesh. The heat was becoming unbearable. "There," Brick shouted, pointing towards a section of the far wall. "See, that looks like piping." He was right. Embedded within the fleshy wall, running vertically, was what looked like a cluster of large-diameter pipes, maybe 3 feet across each, disappearing upwards into the gloom. They looked old, stained, partially overgrown by the poolsing tissue, but potentially climbable. A route upwards. "Let's go," we half-carried, half-dragged Kenji back into the sludge, the thick fluid seeming to grasp at our legs, resisting our escape. The heat intensified on our backs as the enzymatic steam filled the chamber behind us. We slogged towards the pipes, the foul muck splashing around our waists. We reached the wall. The pipes were slick with condensation and organic slime, but offered handholds and footholds. Brick, despite his injured arm, started climbing immediately, testing each hold. "It's doable," he grunted down. "Slow going, get Kenji up here." Getting the unresponsive Kenji up was a nightmare. It took both me and Evelyn pushing from below while Brick hauled from above. Lena scrambled up after Kenji, her movements quick and desperate. Finally, it was my turn. I started climbing, the disgusting sludge trying to pull me back down. Behind us, the entire surface of the muck pool was churning, steaming as the enzymatic digestion cycle hit full intensity. The fleshy island we'd rested on moments before was slowly dissolving, folding in on itself like melting wax. We climbed hand over slimy handhold, foot finding purchase on greasy pipes. 10 feet, 20 feet. The red emergency lights flickered erratically below, casting our ascent in stark, hellish relief. Kenji, secured between Brick and Evelyn, occasionally mumbled data fragments in that disturbing chorus voice. Recalibrating, biosignatures, anomalous, purge protocols, failing. "What does he mean, failing?" Lena panted from above me. Before anyone could answer, a section of the pulsating wall near our ascent route bulged outwards. With a sickening tearing sound, the tissue ripped open, and something long, pale, and segmented, like a monstrous tapeworm made of mismatched parts, lunged out towards Lena. She screamed, scrambling higher. The thing, a failed experiment, a specific biohazard sanitation unit, missed her by inches, its multiple crude eye stalks swiveling, its chitinous mouthparts clicking. It slammed against the pipes near me, shaking the entire structure. "Keep climbing," Brick roared, finding renewed strength, hauling himself and Kenji upwards faster. More bulges appeared on the walls around us, more tearing sounds. The house's immune system, or perhaps its waste disposal cleaners, were activating, responding to the anomalous biosignatures, us. We scrambled desperately upwards, the nightmare chamber receding below, the sounds of tearing flesh and skittering abominations echoing from the walls. The pipes led towards a dark opening high above, where they seemed to converge and pass through the ceiling of the organ chamber. Our only way out. Just as I reached the opening, peering into another dark, narrow service tunnel beyond, I felt a searing pain in my calf. I looked down. One of the pale, segmented things had lunged from the wall, its razor-sharp mandibles clamped firmly onto my leg. Its grip was like iron. It tugged, trying to pull me back down into the digestive horror below. Panic surged through me, cold and absolute. This was it. I was going to be recycled, processed, broken down into raw material for the next batch of horrors. Chapter 6: Severance. Agony ripped through my calf as the creature's mandibles tightened. Its dead weight pulled me downwards, back towards the churning enzymatic hell below. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. This was it. Recycling. "Brick," I choked out, my hand slipping on the slimy pipe. Brick, already several feet above me in the dark tunnel opening, reacted instantly. He braced himself, ignoring his own bleeding arm, and reached down. Not for me, but for the heavy metal pipe we were climbing. With a guttural roar, he wrenched downwards with all his strength. The pipe groaned under the strain, ancient bolts shearing. The section I was clinging to, the section the creature was attached to, ripped partially away from the wall with a screech of tearing metal and rending flesh pipe interface. The sudden jolt loosened the creature's grip for a fraction of a second. It was enough. I kicked wildly with my free leg, slamming my heel into one of its swiveling eye stalks. It recoiled with a wet hiss, mandibles momentarily unclamping. Ignoring the searing pain, I scrambled frantically upwards, adrenaline overriding injury, hauling myself into the relative safety of the service tunnel opening just as the damaged pipe section gave way completely, plunging downwards with the shrieking creature still attached, vanishing into the steaming muck below. I collapsed onto the narrow tunnel floor, gasping, clutching my savaged leg. Blood flowed freely, mingling with the pervasive slime. Brick was already kneeling beside me, ripping a larger strip from his ruined shirt. "Hold still," he commanded gruffly, wrapping the makeshift bandage tightly around my calf. The pressure was agony, but it slowed the bleeding. "Can you walk?" "Have to," I gritted out, teeth clenched against the pain. Lena and Evelyn helped me up. Evelyn did a quick professional assessment. "Looks clean, surprisingly. No obvious venom sacs, but deep punctures. Risk of infection in this environment is extremely high." She glanced back towards the hole leading down to the digestive chamber, now thankfully monster-free. "We can't stay here." The service tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for two people abreast. Metal grating underfoot covered a channel filled with sluggishly flowing, something I didn't want to identify. Wires and conduits snaked along the walls and ceiling like metallic ivy. The only illumination came from intermittent, flickering emergency lights, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes. The air was stale, recycled, carrying the pervasive smell of decay and ozone. Every few yards we passed small, recessed hatches marked with cryptic alphanumeric codes, side tunnels, access points, storage. There was no way to know. We moved slowly, supporting Kenji between us. He was mostly limp, occasionally twitching, his eyes still faintly glowing that disturbing blue. My leg throbbed with every step, but the adrenaline hadn't faded entirely. Behind us, I imagined more segmented horrors slithering from the walls of the chamber we'd escaped. Ahead, only darkness and uncertainty. "Direction?" Brick asked, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly forward, with no branches or turns visible yet. "Keep going," Evelyn said. "This feels like a maintenance corridor. It has to lead somewhere, possibly back towards the staged areas of the house or deeper into the core infrastructure." Kenji chose that moment to speak again, the chorus voice overlaying his own weak tones. "Vector, confirmed, proceeding towards Nexus, point, Omega." "Nexus point Omega," I repeated sharply. "Kenji, what is that?" The blue glow in his eyes pulsed. "Core, processing, origin point of iterative loop simulation hub." His own voice struggled through. "It's the brain jacks the heart where it all starts." The heart of the house, the source of the paradox. Could we reach it? And if we did, what then? Could we reason with it, destroy it? "How do we get there?" Evelyn asked urgently, leaning close to Kenji. "Follow maintenance, conduit 7B," the chorus voice stated flatly. Then Kenji shuddered, gasped, and his eyes cleared momentarily. It's showing me. Tunnels. Junctions. Have to fight it." He groaned, pressing his hands to his temples. It wants us to go there. Why?" "A trap," Lena whispered, looking nervously down the dark tunnel. "Perhaps," Evelyn conceded. "Or perhaps it believes itself invulnerable. Or it has reached a stage where direct interaction, direct assimilation is its goal." She looked at Kenji with clinical concern. "His connection is bidirectional. It sees through him, but he glimpses its systems. It's dangerous, but potentially our only advantage." We pressed on, following Kenji's fragmented, painful directions, relayed between bouts of the chorus voice taking over. Left at a junction marked Flow Control Zeta. Down a rusty ladder into a lower, hotter tunnel humming with power conduits. Through a cramped crawl space that scraped against my injured leg, forcing stifled groans. The house seemed to be fighting us passively now. Obstructions. Dead ends Kenji had to reroute us around. Sudden bursts of pressurized, foul-smelling air from grates. And the sounds. Faint skittering within the walls. Distant, rhythmic pounding like a monstrous heartbeat. And sometimes horribly muffled voices whispering from ventilation shafts. Fragments of our own conversations played back. Distorted echoes of the confessions from the original booth. And sometimes the faint, chilling sound of my daughter Sarah's laughter, twisted into something mocking. The memory thief wasn't just stealing. It was weaponizing what remained. After what felt like hours navigating the biomechanical bowels, Kenji directed us towards a large, circular hatch sealed with multiple locking clamps. "Nexus, chamber, access," the chorus voice announced through him. His own voice added weakly, "This is it, be careful, it knows. We're here." Working together, Brick and I managed to release the heavy clamps. The hatch swung inwards, revealing not another tunnel but a vast, dimly lit space. It was breathtakingly horrific. We were standing on a narrow metal gantry overlooking a cavernous chamber. Below us, suspended in the center by thick bundles of cables and pulsing organic umbilicals, was a sphere of interwoven crystal and pulsating bioluminescent tissue, easily 30 feet in diameter. The Nexus, the house's brain. Light pulsed within it, shifting patterns of color, blues, greens, reds, corresponding to a deep, rhythmic thrumming that vibrated through the gantry. The walls of the chamber weren't metal or flesh, but seemed to be composed of countless screens fused together. Most were dark, but some flickered with static. Some showed distorted fragments of the reality show house, different iterations. And some showed faces. Vague, shadowy faces just watching. The unknown audience integrated into the very architecture of the core. And standing silently on the gantry, positioned between us and the ramps leading down towards the Nexus, were figures, 3 of them, not the monstrous mirror selves. These were the other kind, the silent, dead-eyed duplicates. One of me, one of Evelyn, one of Brick. Featureless, affectless, holding no obvious weapons but radiating an aura of profound wrongness. Guardians. "Okay, plan B," Brick muttered, eyeing the duplicates warily. "Direct interface," Kenji whispered, his eyes fixed on the pulsating sphere below. The blue glow was intense now. "If I can touch it, overload the core protocols, introduce a paradox loop it can't resolve." "You'll fry your own brain, Kenji," Evelyn argued, gripping his arm. "Better than becoming them," he rasped, gesturing towards the silent duplicates. "It's the only way to break the cycle, maybe sever the connection for everyone." Before we could debate, the duplicates moved. They didn't rush. They advanced with a calm, deliberate surety, their dead eyes fixed on us. There was no malice, just inevitability. "Distraction," I yelled. "Brick, Lena, keep them busy. Evelyn, find a control interface, anything." I looked at Kenji. "Can you do it?" He nodded, his face pale but determined. "Guide me to the umbilicals." Brick met his duplicate head-on. It was like watching immovable object meet immovable object. They grappled silently, sheer strength against unnatural stillness. Lena, overcoming her terror, screamed and threw a loose piece of grating at the Evelyn duplicate, forcing it to sidestep, breaking its advance momentarily. Evelyn scanned the gantry railings, finding a small, sparking access panel. She ripped it open, revealing a tangle of wires and a port. "Maybe," she shouted over the thrumming, "need a compatible connection." I half-carried Kenji towards the edge of the gantry, near where one of the thickest organic umbilicals connected to the walkway before plunging down to the Nexus sphere. The duplicate of me advanced steadily, ignoring Brick's struggle, ignoring Lena's panicked attacks. Its dead eyes met mine. There was nothing behind them, just code, instructions. "Now, Kenji," I yelled, shoving him towards the umbilical. He reached out, trembling fingers touching the pulsating, fleshy surface. The blue light in his eyes erupted, engulfing his entire head. He screamed, a raw, human sound of agony mixed with the shriek of overloading data streams. The nexus sphere below pulsed erratically, colors flashing wildly. Alarms began to shriek throughout the chamber. Screens on the walls flickered violently, displaying cascades of error messages. My duplicate lunged. I met it, tackling it low. It felt wrong, too firm, too yielding, like wrestling a sack of wet concrete. We crashed to the grating. Its dead hands closed around my throat, inhumanly strong. My vision started to dim. Suddenly the duplicate froze, its grip slackened, a look of surprise flickered across its blank features. It looked down. A length of sharpened pipe, scavenged from God knows where, protruded from its chest. Brick stood behind it, breathing heavily, his face grim. He ripped the pipe free, and the duplicate collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, dissolving into flickering static and then nothingness. The other duplicates, their connection apparently severed by the core overload Kenji initiated, also froze and dissolved. The entire chamber shuddered violently. Sections of the gantry buckled. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. The nexus sphere below flashed blinding white, then went dark. The deep thrumming ceased abruptly, replaced by the groaning sounds of catastrophic system failure. Kenji collapsed, the blue light fading from his eyes, leaving them dull, unfocused. He was unconscious, maybe worse. Evelyn rushed to his side. "Did it work?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. The reality around us began to stutter. The walls flickered, showing glimpses of the reality show house. Iteration 1, then 2, then glimpses of stark white labs, then back to the Nexus chamber, then flashing red warning signs. The fabric of this manipulated space was tearing apart. "Stairs!" Brick yelled, pointing to a service ladder at the far end of the gantry we hadn't noticed before. "Looks like it leads up." We grabbed the unconscious Kenji and scrambled towards the ladder as the gantry beneath our feet began to crumble. Climbing again, escaping upwards as the heart of the nightmare house died beneath us. The ladder led to a simple metal door. It wasn't locked. Pushing it open, we weren't greeted by darkness or another tunnel. We were hit by cold air, real air, and the sound of rain. We stumbled out onto wet asphalt, a dark, narrow alleyway behind a row of nondescript buildings. Rain plastered our filthy hair to our faces, washing away some of the grime and sludge. Above, a sliver of gray, bruised sky was visible between the rooftops. City sounds, distant sirens, traffic, muffled voices surrounded us. We were out, genuinely, impossibly out. We collapsed against the cold brick wall, gasping, shivering, staring at each other. Brick, bleeding from multiple wounds but alive. Lena, crying silent tears of relief and trauma. Evelyn, checking Kenji's vitals, shallow pulse, unresponsive but breathing. And me, my legs screaming in agony, my body bruised, my mind fractured. We survived, we broke the loop. But the victory felt hollow. Kenji might never wake up or never be the same. And us. We looked at each other, seeing the shared horror in our eyes, but also the gaps, the stolen memories, the pieces of ourselves left behind in the house's paradoxical iterations, digested by the memory thief. I closed my eyes, concentrating hard, trying to conjure the image of Sarah on her 8th birthday, the color of her dress, the taste of the cake, the sound of her laughter. Still fuzzy, still indistinct, a photograph bleached by the sun, an echo fading in an empty room. We were free, but the house had taken its toll. We escaped the prison of plaster and wire, the paradox of reflections and stolen time. But the real horror, the pieces of ourselves we'd lost, we would carry forever. The exit door paradox wasn't just about the house. It was about what you leave behind to get through. The end.